Hello, my loves. My name is Saigerrose, but my friends call me Gigi. You guys can call me Sage, Saigerrose, Gigi, whatever you'd like, because here I'm all about the power of choice, and the power of choice is literally what made me want to create this video. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about those moments where life almost feels like sand kind of slipping through your fingers. And it's almost like the harder that you try to hold everything together, the more it just feels like everything is falling apart. And in those moments, it can be really hard for you to hold yourself together, let alone try to figure out how to get out of that. And so today I really wanted to talk about how to gain control after losing it. Because there's going to be moments in life where you lose control. A relationship ends, an opportunity falls through, you didn't get into your dream school, or even that you watch a version of your life begin to fall apart before it even got the chance to begin. And when that happens, people might tell you to let go, to move on, or to trust that everything happens for a reason. But those phrases don't tell you what to do when you wake up the next morning and everything still feels so unfamiliar to you. So how do you actually regain control after losing it? I think the first step is to understand what you really lost, because sometimes we aren't just grieving a person or an opportunity or an outcome, but we're also grieving like the version of ourselves that existed when that future was still possible. We miss the version that had something to look forward to, the version who had somewhere to place her hope, the version who felt like chosen by life. And when something becomes important to us, we start like reorganizing our energy around that. You become the person that shows up for someone. You become the person working towards an opportunity. You're this person with this plan, this role, this path, someone who knows what's gonna happen next, or at least like has an idea of it. So when it disappears, all of that energy becomes displaced. And I think that's why losing control can sometimes feel like you're losing yourself, because it's not that something is gone, it's just that you lost a place where you knew what you were becoming in a way, or you no longer know how to or where to even place the person that you were becoming. And the first way that you regain control is to acknowledge that. You don't need to rush into a lesson. You don't need to immediately tell yourself that like everything happens for a reason, something better is coming, or like it just simply wasn't meant for you. Because maybe those things are true in hindsight, but for now, it is okay to just allow it to be painful. You're allowed to grieve the life that you thought you were gonna have. You're allowed to miss that person. And like, you're definitely allowed to be angry, confused, disappointed, scared, afraid. Like, you're able to feel all of these emotions at once because they are just emotions, they're not truths. And feeling those things doesn't make you powerless, it makes you honest. The goal isn't to pretend that losing control doesn't hurt, but I think the goal is to keep the pain from deciding who you are. Because there's a big difference between losing control of an outcome and losing control of yourself. You may not get to choose whether someone stays, or if an opportunity works out, or if life goes according to the plan that you had in your head. But you do get to choose whether you abandon yourself if it doesn't. And I think that's where and when control begins to return. When you stop asking, how do I force that life to come back? And start asking, how do I take care of myself in this life that I have now? And sometimes that looks like so incredibly ordinary, like literally just getting out of bed, taking a shower, cleaning your room, eating something, calling someone you trust, like even going outside, even though you would much rather stay still, stay inside, stay in bed. When your mind is overwhelmed by everything that you can't control, being able to return to those small decisions shows you that you are not completely powerless. You can't always control what happens, but you can control what you decide to do in the next 10 minutes and the 10 minutes after that. You don't regain control by making one big life-changing decision, but you regain control by making small promises and keeping those small promises to yourself, because that's how you begin rebuilding self-trust. And I actually talked about that a little bit in a TikTok that I made about building confidence. It was like how to not give a gaff what people think. And you build confidence and self-trust, and therefore self-trust, by making these promises to yourself and keeping them and showing yourself that you are someone that you can rely on. Anywho, the next step is to separate what happened from what you decided that it means about you. Because loss has a really, really intense way of becoming very personal. Was I not good enough? Was I not ready? Was I not worth choosing? Was I never meant for this? But there is a difference between being rejected and being reduced. And there is a difference between not being chosen and deciding that that means you have no value. A relationship ending does not mean that you were unlovable. One company saying no does not mean that you're incapable. One school rejecting you does not mean that you cannot live a beautiful life, because those are events. And now the story that you create around them is something else. And you have to be careful not to turn one painful experience into a permanent definition of yourself. Because real control is being able to look at something that did not choose you and still choose yourself. Not in a cliche way, not by pretending that you never cared, but by refusing to participate in your own abandonment just because something else left. After that, you have to decide where all of that displaced energy goes to, because all of that love, ambition, hope, effort, all of those things that you were pouring into your future don't just disappear once that future changes. That energy is still inside you, so where will you put it now? Will it go into obsession, self-blame, replaying every conversation, trying to force an old door open? Or can some of it go into you? Can it go into your healing, your creativity, your friendships, your routines, your relationship with yourself? Sometimes regaining control means creating something. And not necessarily like a business or a masterpiece or a life-changing project, but sometimes creation is writing affirmations for yourself on a sticky note and putting them on your mirror. Sometimes it's rearranging your room because you need your environment to reflect that your life is changing. Sometimes it's making a video because you want someone else to feel less alone. Sometimes it's building a new routine, starting a new habit, or just learning how to speak to yourself differently, because I think that's very important, the ways that we speak to ourselves, because the way that we speak to ourselves reflects what we think about ourselves for sure. So really keep that in mind in this process as well. I think that it's very important to be as reflective as possible. At the end of the day, we cannot control everything that happens to us, but we can create meaning from what happens. And I think that that's one of the most powerful forms of control that we do have. Eventually, you have to let yourself imagine a future that's different from the one that you lost. Not necessarily better, because honestly, you may not even be ready to call it better just yet, but just different. When we are attached to an outcome, every other path can feel like a lesser version of our lives. But a changed life doesn't automatically mean a ruined life. Sometimes we become so committed to resurrecting our old life that it's so hard to see the new one that's literally trying to form right in front of our eyes. You don't need to understand that life today. I get it. You are gonna simmer in that hurt, in that sadness, in that disappointment. You're going to simmer in it because that's what you have to do in order to be able to see it for what it is. But I do want you to be curious about it. Who are you outside of this relationship, outside of this acceptance letter, outside of this job title? Who are you outside of the version of your life that you had already decided was going to happen? At first, those questions can feel terrifying, but at the same time, they can also free you, because maybe you didn't lose your purpose, you just lost one place where you were putting it. Maybe the relationship ending gives you permission to stop shrinking yourself for someone who was never going to meet you fully. Maybe losing that job opportunity gives you permission to not place all of your worth on one company saying yes. Maybe not getting into your dream school gives you permission to still build a beautiful life, even though it may not resemble the one that you had imagined. Regaining control doesn't mean becoming completely detached. It doesn't mean never caring, never remaining hopeful, never wanting something that deeply again. It means learning to live life with open hands and learning that it's okay to love something without placing your whole identity inside of it. Because control at its healthiest isn't the ability to force an outcome, but it's the ability to trust yourself after that outcome changes. Because like I said, like all those good emotions, like desire, love, ambition, purpose, all of those things still have somewhere to go. And sometimes the place that it just really needs to go to is back to you. When your sense of self is built entirely on what you have, what chooses you, or what goes according to plan, almost anything can take you away from yourself. But when it depends on your ability to return to yourself, loss becomes something totally different. It becomes like a doorway. Not one that you asked for, not one that feels good at first, but a doorway into a version of you that no longer needs life to go perfectly in order to trust yourself. That is how you regain control after losing it. You grieve what happened. You stop turning it into a definition of your worth. You regain authority over the smallest parts of your day, smallest parts of your life. And you bring that energy back into you. And little by little, you begin building a life that belongs to you again. Not because everything went according to plan, but because even when it didn't, you learned how to remain on your own side. And if you're in a season right now where everything kind of feels uncertain, I really hope that this reminded you that you haven't lost yourself, or you haven't lost control of yourself, okay? You lost control of something external. You're still here and you can always find your way back to yourself, like one small choice at a time, because it really is just the power of choice and choosing better for yourself and choosing to want to be better for yourself. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. If any of this resonated with you, I would love to hear about what you're choosing to let go of, or what you're choosing to pour your energy into. And if you'd like to stay and have more conversations with me, you can subscribe, because I would love, love, love to have you guys here. But anyways, take care of yourselves, my loves, and I will see you in the next one.